So we've talked about the different types of diffusion, and we looked at historical and contemporary examples and causes of diffusion, and then we looked at religious and linguistic diffusion, and now we're going to just go over the effects of diffusion. There are 4 vocab terms that we need to know. We're going to quickly go over them, and then we're done with the unit on culture. So this should be a pretty easy part of the unit. So acculturation, our first term. This is when individuals adopt cultural traits of another culture. However, they still maintain aspects of their original culture. So they're just practicing different cultures at the same time, one of them being their original culture. So here's an example. A Chinese immigrant learns English, but they also speak Mandarin. They speak it at home or they speak it at work. They're using elements of their original culture, which is the Chinese culture where they're speaking Mandarin, and then their new culture, which involves using English. The next one. Native peoples in Latin America adopting Christianity after European colonization while still following indigenous spiritual practices. They're not giving up their spiritual practices or values, but they're using it in combination with Christianity, the new cultural traits. The spread of Bollywood dance and music in Western countries, influencing local performances and events. We don't see just Bollywood dance and just Bollywood music in Western countries. It's not replacing them, but it's used in combination, in conjunction, that's a good word there, to the Western dance and Western music. Muslim immigrants in Europe adjusting their work schedules to accommodate Western business hours, which is typically 9 to 5, while continuing to observe daily prayers. So they're still following their traditional Muslim culture where they have certain times to pray daily, but they're also adjusting it for the economic part of the country where they, have to work. The next term is assimilation. This is kind of acculturation on steroids. Individuals or groups will fully adopt cultural traits or values while giving up aspects of their original culture. They're going to assimilate. So they're not part of that old culture anymore. They're part of the new culture. It's like a transformation here. So here's an example. Immigrants changing their names to make them sound more local, such as someone becoming Joe. I don't even know how to pronounce that first name. It's very, very foreign to the United States. A second-generation immigrant ceasing to speak their parents' native language. Instead of speaking it in conjunction, they're not going to speak it at all and just use that dominant language of their new country, which could be English, it could be Polish if they're in Poland, it could be Dutch if they're in the Netherlands, so on. A person converting to a new religion and fully embracing its practices. It's like converting from Judaism to Christianity or Islam to Buddhist. You are giving up that old religion and converting to the new one and practicing the values and customs of that new faith. Migrants adopting their political ideologies and social customs of their host country while neglecting or rejecting those of their homeland. Let's say they're a Muslim migrant coming from a predominantly Muslim country with a theocratic government, which means that which is a religious government, where it's probably an Islam religious government, and they would come to a new country. Let's say they're going to Europe, or they go to France or Belgium. They're going to reject having a Muslim-run government, and their political ideologies are not going to reflect those that they had in their home country. Final example here is a very specific example, but I thought it was cool. A family from Ethiopia stops the use of injera bread, I think that's how you say it, in favor of white sandwich bread that we find in our very, very manufactured and processed food-based countries to match the local eating habits, because everyone in school has white bread. If they have cool parents, the parents cut the crusts off the bread. They could do that as well. Let's do multiculturalism. This is the third term here. This is the coexistence. That prefix multi means many or multiple. So we have multiple cultures. This is just the coexistence. It doesn't have to be the peaceful coexistence, but nevertheless, the coexistence of multiple different distinct cultural groups within a society, where each group will maintain its unique and distinct cultural identity. So here's an example. Canada officially recognizes both English and French as official languages here. So we have a lot of French culture as well as a lot of maybe English culture is in the country of Canada. So we have French-speaking Canadians in Quebec. It's kind of that blue area of the map in eastern Canada. And there's also other parts of the country French is spoken. They also have it in the education system as well as a bunch of French cultural traditions. But they also have the coexistence of English-speaking Canadians and modern Canadian culture amongst them. Communities like Chinatown or Little Italy or Little Havana, which is in Miami, I believe, preserves their unique languages, foods, festivals, and other cultural traditions without assimilation here, without giving up those cultural traits. Mexico has a significant population of indigenous groups like the Zapotecs, the Mixtecs, the Mayans, and the Nahues. We have different groups living in this country, and they have their own unique cultures and practices and differences. They probably make food differently, which is pretty cool. I love good food. And then we can see this in another country, like the United Kingdom. We see the Welsh, the Irish, the English, the Scottish. They all coexist within different parts of the country. Some of them have their own governments within the country. So we see different political ideas. We see different cultural traits. We look at fashion, like the Scottish have kilts, and the English, they like fish and chips. That's really a great aspect of the English. I'm just saying. So these groups in Mexico continue to speak their indigenous languages, preserve their traditional practices, and celebrate their festivals while coexisting with the broader Mexican society here. So they're still in Mexico, and there's still a dominant Mexican culture, but they're just coexisting together. Singapore is highly diverse. We see Chinese, Indian, Malay, and other ethnic groups living in the country. The government will preserve cultural festivals and promote these diversities, such as promoting the Chinese New Year or Deepavali and others, while encouraging each different diverse group to maintain its own practices, languages, and tradition. It doesn't force or even promote assimilation. And then finally, our final vocab term for this unit is syncretism. The blending, the mixture of different beliefs, practices, or cultural elements, or you can just say cultural traits, to form a new cultural trait or a new system. When we talked about creolization of a language, back when we talked about historical diffusion, this is an example of syncretism, because we're blending different languages and language traits together to create a new language with vocabulary and grammar and syntax. So the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, in Mexico is the fusion of Catholic and indigenous beliefs, and that combines All Saints' Day with ancestral worship here. We can look at voodoo in Haiti, which merges West African spiritual practices with the Catholic faith and Catholic practices and beliefs, where saints are associated with the African deities. We can look at Sikhism, which is a major religion we discussed about. It's a universalizing religion, and it blends Hinduism's emphasis on karma and rebirth with Islam's monotheism. Hinduism's polytheistic, and Islam is monotheistic. But Islam doesn't believe in rebirth or karma. We can look at this type of dance in Brazil. It combines African dance as well as martial arts with Portuguese influences and Brazilian culture. So you can kind of see three different influences here. And this picture, I was looking at pictures for this presentation. There are so many cool pictures of this. This looks really enticing and really, really cool to watch. Chinese folk religion as well. It's a blend of historical Confucianism, Taoist, and Buddhist. We can look at some Taoist as well. Practices with local folk beliefs. We can actually look at legalist as well, because China's gone through a lot of dynasties, and it's had a long history. There's a lot of different beliefs and values that have kind of blended together to create the modern Chinese folk beliefs and religion. And this isn't like a religion like Islam is. They're not worshiping a god per se, but it is a religion as it influences their way of life and their thinking and their values. And our final example here will be jazz music. Today it's a fusion of African rhythms, blues, as well as European harmonic structures, and it's created a new genre here. So let's review what we just learned very quickly and go through these three examples and identify the effect of diffusion. So the first one here, a church utilizes Christian hymns among African drumming. So they have different cultural traits here that's kind of blended together for their worship. It's blended together and mixed to create this genre of music. And when we think of that blending, that mixture, we think of syncretism here. Number two, Italian and Indian immigrants may live in separate neighborhoods, but both enjoy going to local sports games together, eat local food, and socialize with one another. When we see this presence and this coexistence of different groups within society, we're going to think of multiculturalism. And the last one, a chef learns a new way to make a dish because it's quicker and starts using that method to make the dish over others that he knows. So he's giving up the old ways he made the dishes, old ways of cooking in favor of a new one. And when we give up an old cultural trait in favor of a new one, that's assimilation. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really does help me out, and it costs $0. I have some free resources for you in the description down below if you'd like to use them. If you have any AP Human Geography related questions whatsoever, don't hesitate to leave a comment down below the video or send me a message on Discord. I'll see you guys in the next video though. Adios.